just wear a second hoodie cold, but the kind of cold that chews through boots, seeps into your bones, and turns breath into brittle ice mid-sentence. We are heading deep into old Russia, into the heart of a winter so brutal that even time seems to slow down out of respect. But don't worry, you'll be safe mostly, probably. To be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this if you weren't born here, or didn't have a log cabin with some very specific, time-tested features. I'm not going to bribe you with promises of toasty slippers and eternal warmth, but I will be your guide through one of the cleverest forms of cold weather survival ever devised. Oh, and while you're at it, drop your city and what time it is down in the comments. I like to imagine where you are while you're winding down. Maybe you're snuggled up in bed already. Maybe you're still at work, pretending you're not. Either way, dim the lights now. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in a clearing surrounded by black pine and birch trees, the kind that crack loudly when the frozen wind claws through them. Snow is already knee-deep, and it's only November. There's a thin grayness to the sky, like it's not fully committed to being daytime. You're bundled up in whatever layers you could find. But within 20 minutes, your teeth are shivering out Morse code. Welcome to Siberia. Or maybe it's somewhere in the Komi Republic or near Krasnoyarsk. It doesn't matter, really. The point is, this winter doesn't care about you. You stumble toward a structure that looks like it was carved directly out of the forest floor, a squat log cabin, half sunken into the ground, with smoke curling lazily out of a crooked chimney and frost feathering the tiny window panes. This is your new home for now, for the whole winter, actually. It's called an izba, and it doesn't look like much from the outside. But what it lacks in curb appeal, it makes up for in not letting you die, which is the main thing. As you reach the door, you notice something strange. The whole frame is low. You have to duck significantly, and the door is small enough that squeezing through with your winter bulk feels like you being born again. That is intentional. Every inch of this place is a passive-aggressive fight against the cold. The door is small, so that heat doesn't pour out like it has somewhere better to be. You step inside, and the temperature change isn't instant, but it's a relief. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, baked bread, and something faintly herbal, like dried leaves. Before your eyes even adjust to the dim light, you're in a small, windowless vestibule called a seni. Think of it as an airlock. You close the outer door behind you before opening the inner one, trapping a buffer of cold air and preventing it from rushing into the main living space. This is lesson number 2 in peasant engineering. Never let the outside in. This small, seemingly useless room is also where you'd shed your snow-caked outer layers and store tools, firewood, or even barrels of pickled vegetables. It's a mudroom, pantry, and an atmospheric buffer all in one. Now you open the second, slightly larger door and step into the heart of the izba. The first thing you see, dominating a quarter of the room, is the pek, the Russian stove. This isn't just a fireplace. It's a monolithic structure of clay, brick, and stone, a thermal battery that is the absolute center of life. Its mass is incredible. Once you get a fire roaring inside, the pek soaks up the heat and continues to radiate it slowly for up to 24 hours. This slow, steady release of warmth is far more efficient than an open fireplace, which loses most of its heat straight up the chimney. You only need to fire it once or twice a day to keep the entire cabin at a livable temperature, even when it's -40 outside. But the pek is so much more than a heater. It's the kitchen, with various nooks and chambers for simmering stews, baking bread, and drying mushrooms. It's the laundry room, where wet clothes are hung nearby to dry in its gentle warmth. It's the pharmacy, used to prepare herbal infusions and warm sick family members. And most importantly, for a good night's sleep, it's the bed. The top of the pek is a flat, wide platform, called the palati. This was the most coveted sleeping spot in the house. usually reserved for children or the elderly. Imagine climbing onto a massive, warm slab of stone and sleeping soundly while a blizzard rages just a few feet away. No electric blankets, no central heating, just the ancient, reliable magic of thermal mass. You look around the rest of the single room. It's simple. A long wooden table, benches along the walls, and a red corner with icons, a spiritual center opposite the life-giving stove. The logs of the walls are packed tightly with dried moss, a natural and surprisingly effective insulation that breathes, preventing moisture buildup. There are very few windows, and the ones that exist are small and often covered with shutters or even thin sheets of mica instead of glass. Another compromise to keep the precious heat inside. The entire structure is designed around one principle: retaining warmth. It might be cramped, smoky, and dark, but it is a self-sufficient fortress against a winter that would otherwise be a death sentence. As night falls completely, the wind howls a little louder. You find a spot on a bench near the peck, feeling the radiant warmth on your face. The family shares a simple meal of dark bread and a hearty beet soup, ladled directly from a pot nestled inside the stove. There's no television, no internet, just a crackle of the embers deep within the peck and the low murmur of conversation. You realize that survival here isn't just about the physical structure. It's about the rhythm of life it creates. A slow, deliberate dance with the cold, where every action is measured against the need for warmth. And as you prepare to find your own sleeping spot, perhaps not on the prized palati, but close enough to its glow, you understand, this humble cabin isn't just a shelter. It's a living, breathing extension of the people inside. A masterpiece of low-tech ingenuity that has kept generations alive against the odds. When you open the door, the air hits you like a physical, humid, smoky warmth. You blink, and your face thaws so fast your eyelids sting. It's dim inside, and the smell is intense. Birchwood smoke, sour cabbage, and unwashed wool. You can feel the heat radiating from somewhere central, but it's not from a fireplace like you might expect. We'll get to that. Don't worry. First, just look around. The floor is packed dirt, or maybe rough-hewn planks, polished smooth by decades of felt boots. The walls are made of thick, horizontal logs, still bearing bark in places, and chinked with moss and clay. There are no sharp right angles. Everything is slightly off-kilter, like the house was put together by someone and maybe half-drunk, which, honestly, isn't far from the truth for some of these historic structures. In one corner, you'll see a worn wooden table and low benches. Next to it is the red corner, a shelf holding icons, religious paintings that seem to watch you like you've just interrupted a long, judgmental conversation. These corners were the spiritual center of the home. A low groaning sound from above draws your attention to the ceiling. Someone is moving around up there. Grandma, probably. That's the loft, the warmest part of the cabin, because heat rises. And in a place like this, so do people. You'll often find bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Thyme, mint, wild chamomile. They not just for teeth, they essential for keeping the air from becoming an olfactory war crime in the tight, smoky space you all share. And yes, I said you all. A whole family could live in a single room like this. Imagine you, your partner, 3 kids, grandma, and maybe a chicken or two that refuse to stay outside in the brutal cold. This isn't luxury. It's a kind of high-stakes triage against the elements. Survival is the name of the game. Now, let's talk about that wave of heat you felt when you walked in. That's coming from the stove, the very soul of the Iasba. This isn't some quaint little iron thing tucked in the corner. No, this beast dominates the room. It's huge, built of stone and brick, plastered over with white clay, and takes up nearly a third of the cabin's footprint. This is the Russian stove, or pek. It's an incredible piece of engineering. You cook on it, heat your house with it, dry your clothes, cure your meat, and when things get truly dire, you can even sleep on top of it. You might hear a story from one of the older folks living here. They might tell you about a blizzard that lasted 5 days straight, and how they never left the stove bed. They ate there, slept there, and one of them even had a baby there. That child was nicknamed Pechka, literally, little stove. Whether that specific story is true or not, the sentiment is real. The peck is life. It's a fortress of warmth in a world of ice. But for now, you just sit by the entrance, warming your hands and trying to figure out how you're not already dead. Because let's be real, this level of cold isn't just inconvenient. It's actively predatory. Outside, the temperature drops to -40 degrees, which, incidentally, is the one point where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet just to agree on how miserable it is. The wind makes a sound that's somewhere between a shriek and a laugh, like it knows something you don't. It howls with a chilling indifference, testing every crack and crevice for a way in. Yet, inside this strange, smoky box made of wood, moss, and sheer human stubbornness, you are okay. In fact, you're more than okay. You're comfortable. You might even find yourself peeling off a layer of clothing. The warmth is that real, that profound. That's the secret of the ESBA. Russian winters are monsters. They are legendary for their ferocity. And these Russian log cabins, they aren't just houses. They are armor. They are a testament to the resilience of people who learned not just to survive the cold, but to live with it, using the very forest that surrounded them as their shield. It's a remarkable fusion of nature, ingenuity, and tradition, all packed into one smoky, wonderfully warm room. You look out the frosted window, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel like you could survive this. Maybe if you don't go outside. The shadows get long and dance across the walls like old ghosts. There's bread with a burnt bottom and a crust like stone, but it's warm. Your toes tingle. You haven't felt them in hours. These joints don't just hold the walls up, they make them airtight. The stove's design is ingenious, with a complex system of flues that forces the hot smoke to travel along winding path before exiting the chimney, ensuring every last bit of warmth is extracted and absorbed by the brick. But here, they're not. They've been hewn flat on the top and bottom. It seems like a small thing, right? But this allows them to stack incredibly tight, leaving almost no gaps. I'm running my hand along one of them now. It's a landscape of textures, smooth in some spots, rough in others. And look at this. You can see the scars left by an axe, not a saw. These logs weren't processed in a factory. They were shaped by hand, probably by the very family that first called this place home. There's a direct connection between the builder and the building, a story carved right into the wood. But here's where it gets really wild. These logs don't just sit there. Over the years, they settle. They compress under their own weight, and especially under the immense pressure of winter snow. The whole house is slowly, almost imperceptibly, sinking. So how do you keep the windows from shattering and the doors from getting stuck? The answer is brilliant. The window and door frames are built with these special sliding mechanisms. They recalled absada, little wooden channels that allow the walls to shift downwards without crushing the glass or jamming the frame. It's this gray-green, dry, scratchy stuff that you'd normally walk right past in the forest. But in this house, it's as precious as gold. The process of stuffing moss into the cracks is called kanapaka, and it's a craft that takes both artistry and immense effort. This moss is a triple threat. It insulates against the cold, it blocks drafts, and it even acts as a mild antiseptic, helping to preserve the wood. I've heard old family stories about the best time to gather it. Some say under a full moon. Others claim it has to be after the first frost. Whether there's real science to that is debatable, but the insulating properties are undeniable. And trust me, when the wind is howling outside, like an angry spirit, you're not going to question the wisdom of moss. Just now, I was listening to two elders arguing by the stove. It was all in hushed Russian, but I could tell they were debating the finer points of moss. One was convinced that peat moss is superior because it's denser and more absorbent. The other swore by sphagnum moss, insisting it does a better job of keeping insects away. I just sat there nodding along, trying to look like I understood, but honestly, I was just amazed that moss has dedicated fan clubs out here. It shows you how every single detail matters when your life depends on it. I just stepped outside for a moment, and wow, the cold hits you like a physical slap. From out here, in the snow, the ESBA looks even more impressive. It doesn't just sit on the landscape. It feels like a part of it. It's not just because it's made of trees. The entire structure is designed to be a compact, snow-shedding creature. There are no fancy angles, no porches or balconies to catch the wind. Notice how the eaves extend far beyond the walls. These overhangs create a protective barrier, preventing snow from piling up against the foundation. It's such a simple, smart design. As I walk around the house, I spot one last detail that's almost hidden. The entire cabin is raised slightly off the ground. It's sitting on large, flat stones that act as a simple foundation. And standing here, you can't help but feel an immense respect for the ingenuity that made it possible. Inside again, you sit near the window, a tiny rectangle of bubbled glass, barely enough to see through. But it lets in light, which is a luxury in these long, grim winters. The windows are set deep into the thick log walls, creating a kind of thermal bottleneck. In older izbas, glass was rare or non-existent. It was translucent, not transparent, but it kept out the wind and let in a surprising amount of light. And anyway, who needs a perfect view outside when it's just snow, wolves, and more snow? By mid-morning, the house hums with motion. Kids might tumble down from the loft like oversized squirrels. A pot of kasha bubbles on the stove, filling the air with a nutty, earthy scent. There's quiet conversation, mended clothes, and a slow, steady rhythm of domestic survival. Everything, absolutely everything, revolves around the stove and the structure wrapped around it. The logs, the joints, the moss packed between them. Every single piece is working together, like parts of an old wooden machine that runs on warmth, patience, and a whole lot of stubbornness. Each one is carefully notched and aligned, resting with just the right balance of weight and friction. And that's the first thing you realize. Horizontal logs are not just a stylistic choice, they're physics in action. You see, horizontal stacking is superior in cold climates for one simple, brilliant reason. Shrinkage, which shrinks as it dries out and as the temperature changes, but it doesn't shrink equally in all directions. It shrinks most across the grain, not along its length. So, if you were to build a wall with vertical logs, like standing pencils in a cup, you'd get massive gaps as they dried and shrank unevenly. Drafts would sneak through those gaps like smug little gremlins. But with horizontal logs, they mostly shrink downward, compressing themselves tighter together over time. That means fewer gaps, better insulation, and a structure that actually gets stronger the longer it survives. It's like building with time-release warmth. The snow loads down the roof and gravity does its thing. The logs press into each other more firmly, sealing those joints with a kind of wooden hug that just gets cozier. This is where the real artistry comes in. You run your hand over the corner. It's a complex, interwoven puzzle of wood. This is the Russian joint, or ablo, which means in the round. The logs at the corners extend past the walls, creating those characteristic overlaps you see on the outside. This isn't for decoration. As the upper log settles down into its cup, this groove creates a labyrinthine seal. Any air trying to get through has to travel up and around, losing its momentum and its chill along the way. It's a natural airlock, elegantly carved with an axe. And then there's the insulation. Between each log, you can see a thick, springy layer of sphagnum moss. It's packed in there tight. This isn't just random forest floor debris. This specific moss was chosen for its remarkable properties. When it's dry, it's an incredible insulator, filled with tiny air pockets that trap heat. But when it gets damp, it expands, sealing any gaps even tighter. It's also naturally antiseptic, which means it resists rot and keeps insects away. So, the builders weren't just stuffing gaps, they were installing a dynamic, breathable membrane that responds to the environment. If a little moisture gets in, the moss swells up to block it. When it's dry, it's pure insulation. It's a smart material, harvested directly from the bog. You're not just living inside four walls. You're living inside a thermal battery. This is why, even hours after the fire is out, the air in an IESPA still feels stable and far from the brutal cold just a few inches away. Let's not forget the roof. An IESPA roof is usually steeply pitched. This isn't just for that classic fairy tale look. It's a functional necessity. A steep angle helps shed the immense weight of snow that accumulates over the long winter. A flatter roof would be at risk of collapsing under the load. Traditionally, these roofs were made of wood, often with planks held down by the weight of another log running along the ridge, called the oak lupin. No nails needed, just gravity and clever engineering. Under the roof, there's often a large loft space, or palati. This wasn't just for storage. It was the warmest place in the house, as heat from the stove naturally rose. This is where the children and the elderly would often sleep, cocooned in the warmest air, high above the colder floor. Every single element of the ESBA is a direct response to the challenge of living in a harsh climate. The builders didn't have access to modern insulation, central heating, or computer-aided design. They had trees, axes, and generations of accumulated knowledge. They understood the properties of wood, the behavior of air, and the unforgiving laws of thermodynamics. They learned to work with nature, not against it. The ESBA is a testament to the idea that the most elegant solutions are often the simplest. It doesn't fight the cold with brute force. It outsmarts it with clever design. It embraces gravity to tighten its joints. It uses the thermal properties of wood to store heat. It even uses moss from the swamp as a high-tech sealant. As you stand there, touching the rough-hewn surface of the wall, you feel a deep respect for the minds and hands that built this. This is more than just folk architecture. It's a masterclass in sustainable, climate-responsive design. These walls have stories to tell, stories of physics, of biology, of human ingenuity. They remind us that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a complex machine, but a simple log, perfectly placed. You take another sip of your warm, mossy tea, and for the first time, you don't just see a log cabin. You see a beautifully engineered survival machine, a living piece of history, and a home built with the very heart of the forest. You can almost feel the history in each grain, the silent stories of long, cold winters and brief, sun-drenched summers. A log house like this doesn't quiver in a storm. It stares the storm down until it gets bored and goes away. They don't just hold the house up, they act like thermal anchors, preventing wind from finding its way through the seams. and you better hope you finish before the snow returns, or you'll be living in regret. Regret, and maybe inside a very large snowbank. Turns out, that's where the domovoi lives, the household spirit. It heats the home, cooks the food, bakes the bread, dries your clothes, and even offers a warm place to sleep on top. Step inside an old ESPA, and you'll notice something else. The windows are small. This was a very practical decision. You take another look at the logs and wonder what it took to drag them here. There are no roads, no forklifts, just sleds, oxen, and some poor guy yelling heave for 12 hours a day. Some builders waited until deep winter to move logs because the frozen ground made sledding easier. That's right, They timed their construction transport with the worst season because frozen rivers were more reliable than muddy roads. But all that work, all that weight, and all those hours swinging axes, it pays off. Because these log walls, stacked with care and trimmed with moss, are more than barriers. They're heat traps. You touch the inside surface again. It's warm, faintly radiating the stove's memory. The logs absorb that heat during the day, then slowly release it at night, keeping the room from turning into a meat locker while you sleep. In a place where temperatures drop so low, they freeze boiling water mid-air. That's not just convenient, it's everything. And somehow in this quiet morning light, as the sun barely claws above the treetops, you start to understand the slow genius of it all. These walls aren't flashy. They don't have modern insulation ratings or vapor barriers, but they've outlasted empires. They've seen plagues, revolutions, and 600 kinds of winter. And they're still here, standing strong, holding in heat like the forest's last secret. You're lying on the bench again, watching the soft smoke drift upward toward the rafters. It curls lazily through the cabin air, as if even it is tired of the cold. You feel warmer now. Something about spending 3 days next to a stone stove does that to a person. But there's still a draft near your ankles, just enough to keep you aware that winter hasn't taken a break. It never does. So today, you're going to figure out what's holding all of this together. Not the walls, not the stove we've already given them their moment, but the secret glue, the invisible stitching between every timber. It's time to talk about moss. Yes, moss. That scratchy, greenish-brown stuff squashed between every log in the ESPA. Packed in so tight, it looks like the house itself is exhaling through its seams. You noticed it when you first arrived, maybe assumed it was just decorative, some rustic aesthetic choice to make the place look more forest chic. But now you understand that moss is the difference between a home and a wooden sieve, between comfort and hypothermia. The Russians have a name for this ancient art, kanapa. It sounds like something that might involve a pastry or a folk dance. But no, it means caulking or stuffing the gaps between the logs. It's a dirty, slow, deeply satisfying job that requires both patience and a firm hand. You watch as one of the kids helps their father with the task, jamming moss into the log cracks with a carved wooden paddle and then tamping it down with their thumbs. It's almost meditative, like grooming a giant wooden beast back to health. This isn't just any moss. It's a special kind of sphagnum moss, known for its incredible properties. When it's wet, it swells up to fill every tiny crack. When it dries, it becomes a fantastic insulator. But it's still breathable, preventing moisture from getting trapped and rotting the wood. It's also naturally antiseptic, which helps protect the logs from decay. Generations of builders have passed down the knowledge of which moss to pick, when to harvest it, and how to pack it just right. It's an organic, living part of the home's structure. The process of kanapatka has to be done twice. The first time is during the initial construction. But the house isn't finished then. The builders leave it to settle for a year or two as the logs dry and shrink, creating new gaps. Only then do they come back for the second round of caulking, meticulously sealing every new opening. It's a testament to a philosophy of building that works with nature, not against it. It accepts that wood moves, that seasons change, and that a home is a dynamic thing that needs care. This humble moss, stuffed between massive timbers, is the silent hero of the Russian winter. It's the breath of the forest, captured and put to work, ensuring that life inside this small wooden world remains warm and safe. Looking at these moss-filled seams, you realize it's a perfect metaphor for the community itself. Small, individual efforts, packed together with care and intention, create something strong and resilient enough to withstand the harshest conditions. It's not about grand gestures, but about the patient, persistent work of filling the gaps. It's about understanding the materials you have and using their natural strengths to your advantage. In a world obsessed with speed and synthetic solutions, there's a profound beauty in this ancient, sustainable craft. It reminds us that sometimes the best solutions have been under our feet all along, waiting quietly in the forest. So next time you see a log cabin, look a little closer at the spaces between the logs. You might just see the secret to its survival, the quiet, green wisdom of Kanapatka holding it all together. It's more than just insulation. It's a living tradition, a partnership between human ingenuity and the enduring power of nature. Have you ever wondered how people survived the brutal winters of old, long before modern insulation existed? The answer, my friends, is hiding in plain sight, carpeting the forest floor. And here's the cool part. The moss isn't just there for warmth. It's antifungal. It's antimicrobial. It's self-drying. They say the best moss is harvested on a foggy morning in the late fall, when it's just moist enough to be pliable, but not so wet that it rots. One woman I spoke to swore her family, SESPA, didn't lose a single degree of heat last winter because they used what she called twilight moss. Is that a real thing? Scientifically, probably not. But out here, where folklore and function overlap so constantly, you learn not to argue with grandmas. You just nod and appreciate the wisdom. If you look closely at one of these cabins, you'll see just how much care has gone into the mossing. It's not random stuffing. This is strategy. The moss is packed thickest on the northern wall, the one that takes the worst of the unrelenting wind. The western side, too, where storms usually roll in from, gets a heavy dose. But the south wall is often packed a bit looser, a bit breezier. That's intentional. It lets a little bit of light and air flow through, just enough to keep the house from getting damp and claustrophobic. I got to help out for a while, feeling the rough fibers cling to my gloves, my skin, my sleeves. It's messy, dusty work, and you're constantly brushing moss off your clothes. But there's something weirdly rewarding about it. Each gap you fill is a little victory over the coming cold. Each seam you pack tight is another place the wind won't be able to sneak through tonight. And you can't help but think, if your ancestors didn't think this was worth doing, you probably wouldn't be here to complain about the mess. There's another layer to this though. Literally, some isbas have double-stuffed seams. The first layer of moss goes in during the initial construction. Then, after the house has settled for a year or two after, it's sunk down, compressed, and sort of sighed into its final shape, a second layer gets added. So, I asked, how often does this need to be redone? The answer I got was beautifully poetic. When you start to feel the wind in your soul, you can't get a better indicator than that, can you? So next time you see moss growing in a forest, take a closer look. You're not just looking at a plant. You're looking at a building material, a medicine, and a piece of history all rolled into one. It's a living link to a past where survival depended on understanding the subtle gifts of nature. It's not just a heater. It's the chef, the bed, the clothes dryer, the home spa, and in some old stories, even a backup birthing station. Honestly, it's doing more jobs than you ever have. You peel yourself off the upper platform, the palati, a flat surface directly above the stove, body, and immediately feel the temperature difference. Up there, it was warm enough to bake a potato under your armpit. And the stove itself, it's not some little metal contraption you'd find in a Western cabin. This is a full-body installation, a massive combination of bricks, clay, and occasionally stone, built like a thermal battery designed by an actual wizard. Its secret is thermal mass. It's not about blasting hot air. It's about slowly absorbing. You're tasked with helping restuff some of the cracks, a process called chinking. The moss is surprisingly light and spongy, and as you jam it between the logs, you're literally sealing your home against the brutal Siberian winter with a handful of ancient plant life. It feels primitive yet profoundly effective. Then you learn a quirky and slightly horrifying historical fact. During the First World War, when field hospitals ran low on sterile bandages, they turned to this very same sphagnum moss. Soldiers were literally packed with the same stuff you're currently jamming between logs. That's a thought that's both comforting and deeply unsettling. And it finally strikes you that this entire system, the moss, the logs, the stove, isn't just about resisting the winter. It's about embracing it, living in rhythm with it, instead of trying to pretend winter doesn't exist. Like modern buildings often do with their bland drywall and hollow doors, the ESBA acknowledges it completely. It's a lesson in resilience, taught by a house made of logs, mud, and a heart of fire. This isn't just shelter, it's a living, breathing partnership with the wild. Ever wondered how people survived brutal winters without central heating? Let me tell you about a brilliant piece of survival engineering called the Palati. It's not just some luxury feature in a rustic home. It's a lifeline. Imagine a small, single-room house, an isba, where the only source of warmth is a massive masonry stove, the pek. When night falls and the temperature plummets, the smartest thing you can do is climb up onto the Palati. You quickly realize this whole setup isn't just about finding a place to sleep. It's pure strategy. In some of these traditional homes, the Palati is huge, big enough to fit 3 or 4 people. Grandparents usually get priority, and for good reason. They feel the cold more, and let's be honest, they're probably more vocal about it. But in many homes, especially during the deepest parts of winter, the entire family would pile on. You'd find them all snuggled together in a tangle of limbs and wool blankets. It's not uncommon to hear stories of 7 people sharing a single Palati, all lined up like sardines in their valenki, their felt boots. This wasn't just about being cozy. It was tactical. The combined body heat, the radiating warmth from the stove below, and maybe even a loyal dog squeezed in the middle. That was your entire heating system. But the real genius is in the chimney. On many traditional PEX stoves, the chimney flue doesn't just go straight up and out. It's designed to snake its way through the brickwork, often running right behind or even underneath the Palati platform before it finally exits the roof. This means all that hot smoke and gas doesn't just escape. It travels through this labyrinth of bricks, superheating the entire structure. The Palati becomes a giant, slow-release radiator. Think of it like a built-in heated mattress, but one that runs on firewood, ash, and generations of ancestral knowledge. It's an incredibly efficient way to capture every last bit of thermal energy. Now, imagine you've just come in from the biting cold. Your fingers and toes are numb, almost alien. You feel your toes, which were tingling just moments ago, start to thaw out and come back to life. And then there's the folklore, the quirky, not so often talked about traditions that you might only hear whispered after a long dinner. Some people genuinely believe the Palati has healing powers. I'm not just talking about the comforting feeling of being warm. They believe it has actual, semi-mystical properties. Got the chills? Lie on the stove. Back acting up. The stove will fix it. Baby won't stop crying. You stay warm, and nobody has to dig a grave in the frozen ground. This deep connection between the stove, the home, and the family is woven into the very fabric of the culture. The PEC isn't just an appliance. It's the heart of the house. It cooks the food, heats the water, warms the bodies, and even, according to some, heals the sick. It is a testament to human ingenuity and our ability to create comfort and community in the harshest of environments. The Palati is more than just a bed. It's a symbol of warmth, safety, and family, all powered by the simple, beautiful magic of a well-stoked fire. It's a piece of living history that reminds us that sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones that have been warming us for centuries. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this little trip into the world of the Palati, Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.